Hey everyone, welcome to our panel today, where we'll be talking about all things collectibles. My name is Travis, founder of Highstreet Market, a marketplace for redeemable limited edition products that uses DeFi technology to solve liquidity problems in alt asset trading. Joining us today, we have two of our core members, Jenny, who started out in the traditional antique and art world at Sotheby's, and moved her way into pioneering various sales and production models for digital art in the late 2010s. We also have Gary, a dear friend, but also the most deeply entrenched person I know in the old asset market. If you want alphas on trading card trends from basketball to Pokemon, he's your guy. So let's start things off with you, Jenny. Tell us a bit about your journey and how you ended up here in the metaverse.
Hi everyone, my name is Jenny. I run a VR startup as well, and also I'm a digital art collector. So my journey actually started off as antique market. So in 2010, I was actually working at Sotheby's. So back then, I was doing lots of art dealing on the side as well for stoneware. Then later on, because my background is in electronic art and film, after I moved to Silicon Valley, I get very excited about the virtual reality. That's how I got into the space and gradually transition into the more digital art. And in 2017, I started to sponsor and producing and also collecting VR art specifically, and being having multiple work being premiered at the international film festival and multiple institution and museums as well. So that's sort of my journey.
Awesome. Yeah, that's super interesting. So it looks like a lot of it kind of falls into place as technology develops. A lot of these age-old industries are seeing a lot of changes because newer players are coming in. Digital natives are essentially reinventing the way art is created. So the way collections and production happens also change with the times. So it's really interesting for you to kind of see the old ways and then transition into the new ways. And we definitely will talk a little bit more about that later. How about you, Gary? I know your journey kind of is quite interesting. You know, we met in India, and it's been quite interesting seeing all sorts of different endeavors that you've done. Obviously, corporate work to nonprofits. What made you start collecting things? Like, what made you really start diving so deeply into this deep water of collectibles?
So I mean, with collectibles, it's interesting because obviously, like we've talked about, my work history and things like that. But with collecting, to be honest, it's one of the earliest things I've done in my life. It's by far the earliest hobby I've had. When people ask me, "Oh, how long have you been?" I'm 34 now. People ask me, "How long have you been in the collecting game?" I say I've been in the collecting game for about 25 years. It sounds ridiculous, but if you ask a lot of people in the industry, this is really the truth. For a lot of us, collecting really started out completely not as a business, but rather just this was, pre-internet, sort of kind of, dating myself here, but in a pre-internet world, this is the way we showed our fandom was, I loved NBA at the time. I loved Magic cards at the time. And to a certain extent, maybe I was too stupid to play Magic card at a high level, so I just collected the cards, right? And played the cards. Same thing with Pokemon. At the time, we never really assumed that it would become a business, but, over the last 20 years, frankly, I think even though our parents might say that it's a trend or we'll get over it someday, those things I said, NBA, Pokemon, Magic cards, I still love them to this day. So now that, we are a bit older, we have a little bit more disposable income, this industry has also kind of, exploded into a full-on business, right? There's places like StockX, there's places that can enable things that really resemble, the high-end art market in terms of sales, or can resemble the stock market in terms of, high volume liquidity for some of these pieces. And so, it's now become something that I can do really even as a profession.
I think talking about how things are resembling the traditional art market that we talked about earlier with Jenny, I think the two worlds are merging together in a very interesting way. And, you talked about how growing up, that's kind of something you want to do. And then now you can turn it into a living. I think this speaks to the next question as well about demographics. Who's actually in these marketplaces? You have you have all these collectors that Jenny were talking about. But of course, like, we always hear about these shoe flippers as well. People buying a pair of Jordans and then flipping it for 5, 6x, even more on StockX, like you were talking about. Just wondering, is it, kids growing up and all of a sudden they now have money, they're just buying up all the stuff they couldn't, or their parents wouldn't allow them to buy back in the days. Or, who's actually dominating this market? Who's playing? Who are the players? I guess this is a question for you first, Gary.
Yeah, it's a complex question, but I do think there's a clear way to look at it. So there's two ends of the spectrum, right? And you might be able to say this exists for a lot of things, like you mentioned with the sneaker market. On one end, there's the collectors, those that are there really for their own personal enjoyment, to fulfill a certain personal journey, just to accumulate things that they want to accumulate for the brands that they like, whether it be NBA, Fortnite, Pokemon, whatever. Mm-hmm. But on the other side, like I said, because there's so much money entering the industry, now the flippers have got into it, right? Some people even said that the recent, you could say, a little bit of the plateau of the sneaker industry is partially due to the fact that a lot of that money and a lot of that energy just went into flipping cards. So you can definitely see it because the bot game has increased right now. Like all the big vendors of cards, you're not going to be able to buy off their site because people have, botted the hell out of it. And so, these sites crash on day one. But in terms of the demographics and who makes it up, because of that, the market's also, split up into different sections. So, in terms of the cards these days, crazily enough, right, you can have cards that are sold for well north of $4 million for a single card. Mm-hmm. I would say there's a fair bet that's the collector market. You're not going to get super liquidity on a $4 million card. Right. At the same time, you have NBA Top Shot, right, NFT, or you're going to have cheaper cards that are maybe like $10 a pack. For those, you're going to really see those botters. You're going to really see those flippers, the people that are happy to even just do a 5-minute arbitrage if they can, just selling and flipping.
It's all about a volume whenever it comes to something digital, right?
Yeah, for sure. And the last point I'll just say is that in terms of the flipper market, right, I do say, I don't want to generalize, but you're going to really see that younger skewed demographic, right? You're going to see those like 16 to 17-year-old hype beasts that need their parents' permission to unlock their PayPal, enter that kind of flipping side. But of course, there's people like that in the collector game too. But, I would say these days, that's the biggest kind of new face you see at these shows is the young reseller flipper.
The Gen Zs coming up with all the new ideas and the new innovative strategies, or even just things they learn on TikTok from their influencers and stuff like that. I think that's super interesting from a demographics standpoint. What about you, like Jenny, on your side, from a traditional art market?
Yeah, so I think for traditional markets, actually definitely more centralized and regulated compared to, let's say, the shoe market for sure. And because it started off as like, there's a very wealthy patron and also the old money, the generation. For instance, when I start off in terms of antique trading or auction houses, these are 200 years old, right? So they symbolize the wealth and social status in a way. I remember when I was working at auction houses, most people think that's means like a certain social status. Even for the training session, our HR will tell us that your clientele are millionaires and billionaires, right? So that's something always has to do with money, this market. But also the foundation was built on people appreciate the art and also the historical value of the art. So from like even the antique side in terms of trading, these people are usually in their 50s, 40s, and they have a lot of money, not just money, but also expertise, to become a collector. So that takes a lot of art training and travel around the world. Of course, it's also a small circle, who you meet, things like that. But gradually, you see, it's very interesting. Like a couple of years ago, I met this very young collector at Forbes 30 under 30. He got on the list because he is an art collector. So I was really shocked, like, what does it mean? Because back then, to me, art collector is a very serious word because it probably takes 30 years. if I back then in my mindset, if I want to become a collector, first I need to probably be a millionaire or a billionaire, and secondly, I need to acquire like this 26 years of expertise to say I'm a collector, or this more have a good reputable collection. But now it seems very different. It seems like even for contemporary art market, because there's our PR move, tons of collaboration with different type of brands. So even artists are very different nowadays. So you see like this age, people are getting younger, like they're in their 30s, in their 20s, and of course some of them, their family are in the art market as well. There's a couple of my classmates back in college. I didn't know that, but their family are actually own one of these like the biggest art collections. So definitely their kids will be kind of carry on that kind of legacy in terms of running the gallery, have a little bit like young, representing the young voice, or giving voice to younger artists.
That's really interesting. So you're saying that from a traditional perspective, a lot of the younger kids and generations are coming in here, more so inheriting and learning from their parents who are already art collectors. And on Gary's side, I think it's slightly different, right? That side, kids are kind of challenging their parents' perspective. Perhaps most of their parents are not very into what their kids are doing, and question a lot of the actions that they're playing with online. So this is quite interesting, where you have both younger audiences coming in here, but from two different worlds. But they're kind of merging in the sense of that they're changing what collectibles are, the objects in which represent art, and I think that's something that's really interesting.
And with the rise of virtual worlds, virtual concerts, and virtual everything, I think we're really seeing a new renaissance here. Speaking of virtual worlds, let's actually do a quick change in scenery. If you guys want to quickly follow me and get some fresh air. And welcome to Nantou in Taiwan. Fun fact, decades ago, oolong tea was actually invented here, and this area served as one of the largest marketplaces for tea in the world. Which leads me to my next question. With the recent rise of NFTs, how did the collectibles market change? Maybe you, Jenny?
I don't necessarily think it's like a huge difference in terms for the artwork, but definitely I think the market is very different and the distribution is different. And I think for NFT hype, it really put a spotlight on the digital art. So every day you open the Instagram, you're actually consuming digital content, digital assets, digital art, but we don't pay for it, right? Because there's never this idea with ownership. But I think with NFT, that's something, as a tool, it really changed that and changing the perception of that. I think that makes NFT quite unique in this case.
Interesting. So before NFTs, a lot of digital art, like the memes that power the crypto world, has been taken for granted because they aren't seen as laborious compared to, say, a traditional painting. But now with digital marketplaces, they somehow found value. What about you, Gary? From traditional trading cards to game skins, the digital evolution in alt assets actually differ quite a bit compared to art, right?
I remember the days just going to hotels to meet with people to trade, right? That I suspect in the fine art market does not happen. People do not trade Picassos for Matisse, right? Maybe they do, but it started from there to to evolving to eBay, to evolving to even high-end auction houses that specialize in sports memorabilia. But along the way, I think it is, high liquidity is always a huge struggle. These days, because the industry is so popular and you have rappers and actors that are all saying it, the athletes themselves will say, I collect myself, or I collect my, fellow teammates.
Yes.
At the low end, I would say, $10,000 and below, there's a lot of places like in eBay that's going to give you actually pretty decent liquidity. If you want to sell tomorrow, you can make it happen. But at the high end, very hard. It's going to take like a couple of months to move something like that. So where I think that, the digital asset kind of game, you still, I would say it still represents, like if you say the CSGO market, it's kind of informally built, it's not really kind of this blockchain. It's frankly has nothing to do with blockchain, right? Liquidity was never built in mind when CS thought about the idea of having skins. It's actually very industrious young kids who built an informal market, right? So, but randomly, you have skins that are worth upwards of $10,000, and so to this day, this is one of the biggest challenges by far, which is how do you create accurate pricing, right? Like if especially with cards, right, where you can collect 20, 30 different types of players, you view them kind of like stocks, right? Like if they win a good playoff game, you're hoping the price will go up. But if there's no liquidity, there's no data. And so who's to say, right? If John Morant wins a playoff game, is it going to pop his his cards 10% today? I don't know. I wish I knew, but and so that's the hope. That is the hope of so many of these upcoming platforms.
That's some really good insight over there. Absolutely. Liquidity is something the alt asset world has struggled with since day one, and also the primary problem Highstreet is trying to solve with DeFi technology, of course. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have today. Thank you both for coming, and thank you everyone listening in the audience. Stay tuned for more news on Highstreet, and we'll see you next time.